Welcome to No Room for Phonies.
Episode 97.
It is September 30th, and we are just responding to the episode that we did with Rita, our back to school episode. So the quote for today says, "Creating a culture of integrity and accountability not only improves effectiveness, it also generates a respectful, enjoyable, and life-giving setting in which to work."
It's good. That's by Tom Hansen.
Yeah, I don't know who he is.
I don't know. No, probably.
But I mean, I just think of
psychologist or something like that.
Integrity and accountability improve effectiveness. So integrity to me is like doing, saying what you mean, doing what you mean, whatever it is that you are, it's who you are. You're not pretending.
No, sticking to your moral compass, but not being a phony.
No.
No wonder you like it.
No. But the idea that, there might be some pushback initially, but eventually, the whole organization becomes more effective when there's integrity and accountability.
Yeah.
So anyway, I was just thinking about ways that you deal with accountability and kind of resistance to being held accountable, and what you can kind of do in order to help people when they're struggling with having to be accountable. And I bring this up in education because I just feel like that's an area of education where we really do have an issue in society of accountability.
Yeah. But it's interesting though, like it happens at all levels. Like kids are, they're so comfortable to lie or cover up when they should be accountable. Some teachers are unwilling to be accountable for their mistakes. Like it's really hard for people.
And it is
hard for people to acknowledge they've made a mistake, and they feel if they apologize that they will be punished because they're acknowledging.
Yes, and I mean, I was in an environment where that was kind of true. I felt that.
It's true of everybody.
Yeah, like that you really, if you made a mistake, like there was no way out. You were just going to like burn.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't treat people like that, but the higher, it just kind of, and yet some people could do ridiculous things and get away with it.
Right.
So
and that's where there was no integrity.
There's no integrity. So one of the things they say is to clarify expectations and consequences. Mm-hmm. So like,
and it's interesting because consequences is kind of like gravity. They're just logical.
Right.
Like sometimes that sounds like you're threatening.
But
it's just the natural outcome of, if you don't do your work, people will notice and be frustrated with you.
Right. And providing feedback and support, right?
Mm-hmm. That's like coaching people through.
Yeah. And then this one, resolving conflicts and issues. And I mean, I just always believe that you have to resolve these, especially in the workplace. You have to deal with the issues and the conflicts.
At least try, rather than let them just boil and fester underneath.
Because, some of these issues that have been going on for years and years and years, and then you walk in to solve them, and you walk in and try to solve them, it's really difficult because of the length of time that they've been going on.
They
and
are
that gives
almost
people
part of the culture.
And that gives people the feeling that, like, if they're part of the issue, say they're not contributing or sharing or doing whatever it is that is expected in your culture, then they feel like, how dare you? I've been doing this for years this way.
Or I've been not doing it.
Or I've been not doing it for years this way. Modeling accountability and integrity and empowering.
Well, but that's risky too. And in a culture where it's not the norm, because 100%. The moment that you are vulnerable and say that, okay, I made a mistake, I'm apologizing, what's the restitution I can do, and then move forward. It's like, let's see how we can get them next time.
I'm going to give you the prime example of this week from the media was when Ford actually came out and said, I'm going to redo the Greenbelt deal.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I don't care to have a political discussion, but it's a prime example of a public mistake.
Right.
That's made. And, he stepped forward and said, I realized, and public pressure, of course, whatever. Mm-hmm. But a lot of times when you're in a leadership role.
But it shows integrity. But then the opposition.
It was not even. Like, I was listening to CBC and it's like, we don't care. Like,
that he's apologized.
So therefore.
So now you're just going to, like, they say, but you also made a mistake here. And you also made a mistake.
So I get, nobody can just move on from, and it is hard to move on from somebody making a mistake. But if you make an error and you offer some kind of restitution for that error, or you change your behavior, I think you should be given another chance.
Yeah. Well, and it's like you said to so many of the little kids in your schools, it's a fresh start. Today's a new day. Yes, yesterday, whatever.
And I used to say that to staff too. Like, yeah, you had a really rough day today. Tomorrow's a new day. You have another chance too. And I think another way for accountability is to actually empower and delegate, but really empower and delegate, and not, empower and then
micromanage or take away or
not let people actually make a decision. Like if you set the parameters for something as a leader, then you have to let people go.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Like if you say to them, well, this is an I will not, that can't happen. Mm-hmm. But other than that, you have the ability to make your decision.
Yeah.
And then cultivating a learning culture where, everyone is a learner, and that it's easy to say I'm a lifelong learner.
Yeah. Well,
but, recently, just being asked, about
on resumes, I read it all the time now.
I'm a lifelong learner. But to me, if someone says to me, like, what do you believe and what are my beliefs? Yes, I have core beliefs. I have a moral compass and that, but how my perspective on things does shift because I read things and I understand things, and I'm not staunch about, that this is completely wrong. I'm always trying to kind of listen and understand someone else's perspective on something.
I wouldn't say that you are completely on the fence, relativistic, where any new perspective of something comes along and you're like, oh yeah, I'll adopt that too. Like,
that's not what I mean. I mean, I think that what has happened to me is I've had a core kind of belief in, that giving back is an important, that sort of my core values are around, like when I think of Song of Significance, like finding significant ways to contribute to society and to helping people and to being that kind of a giving, caring, kind person, not necessarily nice.
Right.
And part of one of my beliefs that has changed a lot is that, is the whole thing about happiness. Happiness is not the actual goal here. No. The actual goal is to learn to live with joy and sadness. And, I just read...
for me, it's so funny in American culture because they have the pursuit of happiness built into their... whatever that's called.
But I was just reading in Richard...
We don't have
in Richard Rohr, and I hope I can remember exactly, because I literally was just reading it about, that really it's about being able to live joyfully in a world that is flawed and not give up on it and still want to do things that are going to make the world a better place.
Yeah.
And, he talks about that in terms of kind of some liberalism where it's almost like we've got the answer if you would just listen to us, instead of living within your flawed world and still work and having joy and still working on making it. It's a very, the book I'm reading by him right now is the book of, it's a mystic.
Okay.
It's about the mystics. It's very interesting. Mm-hmm. So anyway, and what do you know, and I think what we're talking about here, like I've asked the question, what would an ideal school cultural and environment be like for everyone involved? I think it would be like what we've talked about above,
mm-hmm.
where expectations and consequences were clear, and there was true feedback and support. Not feed smacking, but feedbacking.
That's a good one. I haven't heard that.
I've read that. Mm-hmm. Like, you don't want to feed smack people because then they're just like, they can't even respond.
Yeah.
And then, you know, where you resolve conflicts and issues and where there's accountability and integrity and people are empowered and there's a learning culture. Like, wouldn't that be ideal if that was truly what was happening?
Yeah.
So, and, you know, how do you think questioning changes the culture of a school environment? And I think that's particularly important in leadership, because I think that when we learn to become leaders who ask questions and listen, we get a lot farther than just, I mean, sometimes there's a bottom line. And sometimes you've asked all the questions and you've listened, and somebody has to make a decision.
Yeah.
And I think that's a part of leadership too.
Well, and I mean, we work on that in small groups with students.
Yeah.
Training them to, you know, work, everybody puts input, but then if you can't come to a consensus, then somebody has to make the call.
Somebody has to at some point.
And, you know, for the younger kids, you can still teach them that leadership role and have it shared. And you know, if it started with the kids and was modeled by the teachers and administrators.
Yeah. And I mean, that's where I think, you know, the whole idea of critical thinking, right?
Yeah.
And it's too bad that kind of
inquiry-based learning.
You know, I don't think it's done in the way that it kind of should be.
In a lot of places. I think there's still school districts that do it quite well. But
yeah. But I mean, it's not across.
No, but as long as the industrial, what's it called, machine mechanism is in place, where we just think that we're training people to work in factories.
And that brings us right into the next question is, where should education go in the next 20 years? Like, we have said that education needs to change, but still when you walk into schools, classrooms look pretty much the same as they did.
Used to. Yeah. So I think
does that matter? Will schools always look the same, or can you incorporate new things within that same environment?
I'm just thinking of like the outdoor schools in Finland and like there are all those experimental schools. I just, unfortunately, like, I don't know where the research happens, if it ever happens, because it's not mainstream, so they don't get researched.
Well, our problem, 100%, our problem with the education system is the political system, because education runs in 4-year cycles.
Yeah.
In Ontario. And educational research is not a 4-year cycle machine.
No.
You sometimes need like 5 to 10 to 15 years to actually work something out.
Yeah. Well, that whole disillusionment with that researcher that upon so much language arts was based on, and that ended up being fraudulent research.
Yeah. But, you know, we buy into, and I think to some degree, and this I saw in a lot of cases, you buy into something that's easy, right? Give me the textbook or the resource that I can follow and teach from.
Yeah.
And then where I never taught like that.
No.
I had my learning objectives, and then I looked at a variety of resources in order to make those. And some things worked for some kids and some things didn't work for some kids. So I had to be more, I felt like I was more of a professional because I was actually trying to, like a doctor who looks at a good doctor, let's say, who looks at a patient, they just don't, like, they actually are problem solving what's going on with the person rather than just look, oh, you have this, oh, you must have this, but I also have this. like it's more of a puzzle. And I always looked at kids that way, that they were kind of like a really interesting, fun puzzle to solve.
Yeah. And the thing is,
and when I got them all together, then I, when that kid who just couldn't seem to read the way other kids were reading finally got it, it wasn't, I couldn't almost go back and say, well, I did this, and this. I did this, and then I did this for a while, and then I went backwards, and then I did this for a bit, and because I was putting the puzzle together. And when you have a 1,000-piece puzzle and you're looking out at it, you try one strategy for a while, but then if that's not really working, you switch. Then you move
on to another pattern or color base or whatever,
So I think we've kind of... But I don't know if our education
will... seeing in the next 20 years...
I know
we
it's
just
hard.
Have big size.
Well, it's just hard to feel like... I don't know. I mean, there's so many things
teachers,
that people...
The teachers teach the way they were taught. Like, they can go to teachers college and they can do this, but they just slide into...
say, well, if we had one school board, that would solve the problems in education.
Yeah, no. And if we centralized it, and then, in the U.S., they had the No Child Left Behind and all those learning outcomes, and everybody had to stick to them.
I personally, there's one thing that I feel would change education, start the change, and that is the actual professionalism of teachers.
Yep.
And I know they have this thing called professional judgment, but instead of using that to be innovative, they use it to avoid
work.
Not everyone.
No.
And whenever I'm speaking about something, it's something I've observed, but I'm not generalizing it to everybody I've ever met. There's a lot of great people out there doing wonderful things and whatever, but you just seem to, there just seem to be a growing number of people who are disenfranchised with their jobs and their work and are not appreciative. And so I guess that's, one of the things that I would love to see in society is more, less entitlement and more appreciation for what we actually have.
Yeah. It would be really interesting to talk to a child that, like in a rural community in a poor country, that is desperate to get to a school to become literate and what that means to them. Well,
Rita let's go back to Rita told a story of a family, and it was during speech writing, and the speech like that. Go back and listen to that, because that really hits you about how entitled we are to, expect. And how devalued education has become. Not that I'm saying that, but I mean...
Well, I would say society devalues the critical thinking and devalues... But then you have the elite, educated elite, who think that they're so much smarter than because of their degrees or...
Well, and
because like the disenfranchised... Sorry, I'm from the U.S. The disenfranchised poor, who feel that the liberals hold it over them, that they're not educated. Well, that's why Trump talks in such base folksy language.
But you think about the demands of some people who have jobs where they make a lot of money, and then you look at the people that work in like. Tim Hortons and Walmart, and how they're, struggling and trying, and
they need the money.
But the other people will look on them and say, well, if you had spent if you had gotten the education, I worked hard and got all this education, so I deserve this.
Right.
So how do you fix that in society? I'm not
sure, because some of them,
because I did work hard.
Some of them never had the choice, had the support from parents, or they never thought of themselves as being able to, so they never pursued. Like some kids
us right back to the importance of education, and inspiring people to be. Education is what changes the world, and so education is an essential service. To be honest, so. Yeah, it'll be interesting to watch where things go. But I think there were a lot of great stories in our when I was talking to Rita. So I encourage you to go back and listen to that, and to kind of think about how you can support education, public education in society, which means both Catholic and
in Ontario,
public in Ontario. But how can you support it? What can you do? And I've been thinking about that a lot lately, because now I have little people that used to be babies that are now in school, right? That have all of a sudden grown up. And what kinds of things can I actually do to support the schools that they are in, and what is it that we can, kind of do? Because if I value education, then I need to figure out how to support them, even though I'm retired and doing whatever. So go back, listen to the stories that Rita and I told, and then we'll be back on October 15th with a very special travel episode, which we are not talking about right now.
No.
So tune in. Thanks for joining us for No Room for Phonies, and happy fall.
Good night.